You don't need to share my Christian faith to appreciate the virtue of human rights. I'm not suggesting you do. But equally, we should be careful about diminishing the influence and the voice of Judeo Christian faith in our Western society, as doing so risks our society drifting into a valueless void. In that world, there is nothing to stand on. There is nothing to hold on to, and the authoritarians and autocrats win.
Well, never afraid to talk about his personal Christian faith, Scott Morrison used his valedictory address to Parliament this week to call for the nation to return to its Judeo-Christian roots. That's obviously a good and necessary thing if Australia is to find its way out of its current political and cultural mess, something even the Australian newspaper's Paul Kelly acknowledged. But what is perplexing is that Morrison had 17 years, including 3 as Prime Minister, to champion these values. Paul Kelly wrote the following: "Why only now does he talk in this way about his deepest beliefs? And if he had, wouldn't he have been more successful?" Well, it's hard to disagree with that analysis. Instead, time and time again, Morrison let down Christians and conservatives who thought his faith might translate into public and political advocacy for the values he now calls the nation back to. After all, the left, whether they be Greens, Teals, Labor, or the big leftist cohort strangely named moderates within the Liberal Party, they argue for their values with religious fervour every day. This like-minded cross-party quad believes in the climate cult, that children's gender takes on a mystical rather than biological dimension, and that the sacrifice of unborn babies for the sexual liberation of men is a sacred ritual that must not be impeded. Challenge any of these assumptions behind these modern shibboleths in the Parliament or in the public square, and great wrath will descend upon the challenger. That possibly explains why there is so little debate on these culture-defining issues. It explains Morrison's silence and even acquiescence during his political career. The biggest and most far-reaching social change that happened on Morrison's watch was the redefinition of marriage, which abolished in law the gender diversity requirement for society's most important institution. Degendering marriage has had massive consequences for children who are now required to miss out on the love of a mother or father. It has turbocharged the attack on children's biological gender, trashed the ability to speak freely about gender and marriage, and has all but destroyed religious freedom. Yet apart from making a public statement in support of keeping the definition of marriage intact, Morrison then sat out of the 3-month plebiscite campaign back in 2017, leaving the fight for others. As the most senior pro-marriage and openly Christian member of the then Turnbull government, he squibbed it. Not so Morrison's cabinet colleagues like Christopher Pyne and Malcolm Turnbull, who fought hard for the yes side. Now, in 2023, there was no guarantee that the voice referendum could be won for the no case. In fact, the yes case were the clear favourites for the same reason the yes campaign in the 2017 marriage plebiscite was expected to win. But that didn't stop Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price standing up and putting everything on the line for what was right, even when her leader, Peter Dutton, was unsure. Courage begat courage, and public advocacy convinced Australians that the elites were wrong. Now, the 2017 marriage campaign lacked such a political figure fighting the radical elites. Morrison had shown courage as Shadow Immigration Minister and then again as Immigration Minister in stopping the boats, which were fuelled by the deadly people smugglers. But Morrison couldn't find the resolve to fight for the rights of children to know the love, wherever possible, of both their biological mother and father. Protections for freedom of speech and freedom of religion could not be legislated when he was Prime Minister, with 5 of Morrison's own Liberals voting against his attempt to fix what was broken by the change to marriage law. Now, same-sex marriage activists like the Liberals' Tim Wilson and the New South Wales politician Alex Greenwich are pushing for commercial surrogacy so that gay married men can rent women's wombs and purchase babies. This is the great unfinished project of the same-sex marriage debate. If only Morrison had fought for Judeo-Christian values. His speech this week mentions the Judeo Christian idea of human dignity, yet he put his prime ministerial signature on a letter supporting Australia's abortion to birth laws, the ultimate affront to human dignity. When former Nationals MP George Christensen was fighting to get a bill passed to require medical assistance to be rendered to babies born alive after botched abortions, yes folks, this really happens in Australia, Morrison wrote back to Christensen, fobbing him off to the then Health Minister Greg Hunt. But Morrison's letter contained a defence of abortion which so disgusted Christensen that he published it on social media. In the letter, Morrison states that his government supports reproductive and sexual services. These are euphemisms for killing unborn babies. The letter says, and I quote, "We continue to work with states and territories on the availability of safe and legal abortion Australia-wide." Morrison then went on to brag about how proud he was that Australia's overseas aid helps export abortion to women in poor countries. When I reposted the letter on my Facebook page, I received an angry phone call at 9 p.m. one evening from one of Morrison's cabinet colleagues and prayer partners, Stuart Robert. I said that if the Prime Minister does not believe what is in his letter, he should correct the record. "That is not going to happen," Robert said to me. Now, when City Point Christian College followed the recommendations of the Ruddock Commission into Religious Freedom and published its policy on marriage and gender so that girls could be protected from the encroachment in their sports and private spaces from males identifying as females at school, Morrison threw the college under the bus. "I don't support that," he said on radio. In the lead-up to the 2022 election, Morrison had two strong female candidates, Catherine Deves and Senator Claire Chandler, fighting to save girls' and women's sports from males identifying as females demanding access to their sports. Morrison, when questioned, said his government had no plans to save women's sport. The bus was quite literally getting a big workout. Now, silence in the face of evil is evil, Dietrich Bonhoeffer famously said. I'm not sure where that puts calculated acquiescence. When Morrison gave his maiden speech to Parliament 17 years ago, he brilliantly said, and I quote, "Australia is not a secular country, it is a free country. This is a nation where you have the freedom to follow any belief system you choose." Well, sadly, this is no longer true for those who refuse to bow to the LGBTIQA+ political ideology on gender and marriage, and so many other issues. Freedom must be fought for. It requires vigilance. 17 years on, Australia is less free, more secular, and as a result, less tolerant. If Australia is to rediscover its Judeo-Christian values and undergo what is a necessary course correction, it will require courageous parliamentarians who will fight for the values with the same fervour we see from the Green, Teal, Labor, leftist, Liberal quad. It is politicians like ScoMo that are driving force behind the Family First Party project.